Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to today's session where we'll focus on the power of PIM for the tools and automotive industry. My name is Kevin Walsh, and I'm a sales engineer with inriver, and I'm joined today by our friends Jeff Bridges, as well as Stephen Peckous from Hyster-Yale. Jeff and Stephen, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. Again, Jeff Bridges from Atlanta, Georgia. I work for a company called Ntara, who's a systems integrator in the PIM and DAM space. We do software evaluations. We do consulting, and a bulk of our work is around implementations in both in the PIM and DAM space. So a longstanding partner with inriver, and also the systems integrator that's been working with Hyster-Yale today. So look forward to talking with you today, and I'll turn that over to Stephen.
Yeah, hey, good morning. Thanks, everybody. My name is Stephen Peckous. I'm Product Information Manager with Hyster-Yale Group. I've spent most of my time with the company in our after sales or aftermarket division as a product manager, and I've spent a good bit of my years and tenure here now working with our PIM solution, which has been inriver, and excited to share our story with you and talk a little bit more about what that means and looks like.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. And so a quick overview of who inriver is before we kick things off. inriver is a product information management platform. We are headquartered in Malmö, Sweden. inriver combines the power of PIM with syndication for marketplaces like Home Depot, Grainger, and many more, combining that syndication with powerful digital shelf analytics to ensure the right content is meeting each of those destinations. This provides our customers with one holistic platform to better manage all of their product information and meet and reach all of their customers all around the world with accurate and engaging product content. As you can see here, a large portion of our base is from the manufacturing industry, and we work with a partner network to help ensure that our customers are successful for all of their implementations. And Jeff, I'll pass things over to you to talk quickly about Ntara.
Yeah, I probably got a little ahead of myself mentioning some of the points here. I mentioned Ntara is about a 25-year-old company. I think this is our 25th year in business. We started out as an agency, and then in the last decade or so have really focused around PIM, and in recent years standing up a practice around digital asset management as well. As I mentioned before, we do general business consulting. We help clients evaluate whether they need a PIM. We'll hear a little bit about that more today from Stephen. And then once a software vendor is selected, we will work all the way through implementation, and then have retainer services around data governance and change management and things of that nature. So we try to be the glue to bring all these things together. And you'll hear a little bit more today about our role with Hyster-Yale as Stephen talks more through that. So Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so Hyster-Yale Group, who are we? We are a global manufacturer of forklifts, namely through the Hyster and Yale brands. We've got a really rich history over 100 years as an organization. We have been, and that brings with it multiple different design philosophies that you can imagine, from implementation of paper to digital assets to all sorts of different things. We've got framework in all these different places, manufacturing unique, innovative products that really touches everything that you work with. A forklift is involved in every cycle of the distribution network. And so what we make and produce is, from 2,000-pound forklifts up to over 100,000-pound forklifts. And something I like to do when I'm in person too, Jeff, I know you got to see it when we were at one of the conferences, but I love to give everybody an impression of the forklift dance, right? And we get up and we kind of move and have our arms go around just to shake things up a little bit. But really, we have material that moves, or we make equipment that moves everything that you touch and see. And with that, we've designed and innovated over the years, and we've got some challenges, right? Diverse data sets and all sorts of different places. We've got an independent dealer network that is really the driving backbone of how we service our end customer. And that brought about some complexities when we thought about what are our go-to-market strategies digitally. And so we needed to evaluate, well, how do we want to achieve that? E-commerce was one of our guiding stars here, and we quickly learned in our blueprinting process, which you'll hear some about with Ntara, we needed a PIM. We didn't know we needed a PIM, but we needed a PIM. And so we went through working with Ntara and engaging, and then really helping to reveal some things about what we had, be it our data or our business processes. And we went through that audit to map and validate and essentially select inriver, which again, you'll hear some more about, but really excited to share some more of that story with you.
Perfect. So I think to kick things off, we'd love to know who out there within the audience already has a PIM today.
You know, it reminds me as we're giving people a moment to answer this. Um, I've been in PIM for 9 or 10 years, and 5 or 6 years ago, was in a meeting, and a sales guy that I was working with asked the client something about, what do you think the most popular PIM is in the market? And everybody's kind of thinking, was it inriver? Is it like, they're going through the different PIM vendors, and the answer was Microsoft Excel, right? So that can be other, if you're living in a spreadsheet world. So all right, well, it'll be interesting to see the results of this as they come in, just to give us some perspective on in the audience out there who already has a PIM, who's looking to think about getting a PIM, why you might think you need a PIM, and we'll explore some of that. And I think we'll transition first into, and Stephen already kind of set this up a little bit, which is when we first engaged Hyster-Yale 5 years or so ago. It was a little bit of a unique process because they didn't come to us and saying, "Hey, we've decided we want a PIM and we need an SI to go implement it." Stephen, maybe talk to us a little bit about the process that you went through and how we worked together to get to the point where you even knew that you needed a PIM.
Yeah. No, it was a long process. In fact, what we did first was really take a look at what do we have, what are some of our goals, and we really started to do some blueprinting. A lot of that was around, well, who is our customer, and how do they purchase? And this was not just one customer, this was plural. Who are our customers? And how do they go through different means of acquiring and understanding what to buy, and do they even know what they're buying to begin with? And so there was a lot that was revealed as part of that blueprinting process, which really set the framework for, revealing some things about our organization business, but then it also helped to give us some understanding and perspective of these different personas. And as we started to map this out and blueprint who is our customer or customers, it really, along with Ntara, helped to give us some framework of how do we go to market next? And how do we, if all of our systems are so difficult or we don't have clarity in that purchasing process, how do we bring clarity? How do we make that a meaningful exchange digitally? How do we, I like to say, have a digital handshake, not SSL, but like literally have a handshake with somebody and say, this is good. I want this. How do we connect to that end customer?
Really cool. And tell us a little bit about where PIM sits in that overall ecosystem. I mean, obviously, you've got PLM systems and ERPs and e-com and you name it, alphabet soup out there. Where does PIM fit into that architecture?
Yeah, PIM is, in the organization, not many people knew what a PIM was or really why we needed a PIM anyways. So where it sits, I mean, we do have PLM systems, which you'll hear a little bit more about that. I think I'll allude to some of those things, but we've got multiple systems across our organization to stand up all the needs to develop and design. And PIM is really for us the essential undergirding platform that helps enable our e-commerce platform. And it can and will do so much more, but primarily today it sits to be able to deliver homogeneous data out to our dealers and customers through e-commerce. And it really starts to gather together a lot of our marketing assets as well as the technical data from these other systems into one platform that we really didn't have visibility to previously.
Thanks.
So, Stephen, I think it was really interesting that you kind of talked about how Hyster-Yale went through this project of figuring out what they needed in order to serve a better customer experience, right? Usually when we're talking to prospects, they're trying to figure out how do they improve their internal processes? How do they make their end users or their marketing team's life easier, better, more efficient, more empowered? And usually the customer experience being improved is almost a byproduct of that initial project of bringing that PIM in. So it's really interesting that you all started kind of thinking of the customer first and backtracked into how can this help the business better. And so I know there's a lot of unique aspects about the Hyster-Yale organization and kind of how you need to manage your product information because you service a lot of your products for so long. And I'm curious, not only what is it about your own products that are so unique that drove you to a PIM, but why Inriver? What was different when you went through that kind of purchasing decision and you likely looked at a number of PIMs out there in the space? What drove you to Inriver, and what were some of the unique challenges that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I thought about this a lot. And really, there's two really important reasons for choosing Inriver. One is that it was completely flexible, completely elastic in the sense that it would support many of these diverse data sets that we had. You know, Jeff kind of jokingly said, "Well, what's the most popular PIM, right? Excel." We were there. We had some of that, right? That wasn't the only means of capturing and gathering data, but there's other disparate systems that we had and still do have today, which are in some transformation. But we quickly realized, and it was revealed to us both through that blueprinting, but also from Ntara as we continue to seek some guidance on this, that we have so many different processes from a global perspective that if we want to stand up an environment that unifies that, you know, we needed something that would support that, not only supporting that timestamp or date in time, if you will, but being able to be flexible enough that as we adapt and migrate through those main platforms, which we're doing today, that Inriver would still serve and support that same homogeneous data without really having, I mean, we can change the connectors to it, right? We can put all these inputs in, and Inriver has given us that flexibility. So that was one really important reason. The other thing is, I, I I think it would be ill-advised of me, not being an expert in the PIM space previously, or being somebody who had, you know, 15 years of PIM experience, to then just make a decision on one platform without guidance from an expert. And that's really where we understood that Ntara intimately knew the systems, and it was important to us that we had a partner who really understood through and through how to establish that framework. They started to know and learn our business and helped to guide us there. But not only that, they then understood Inriver fully and were able to implement that with success for us.
Yeah, we're going to talk more. Our next slide is another poll. Exciting times here. Gartner has a quote out. Go to the next one, Caroline. One more. Gartner's had this for I've seen this for years, and it might be an MDM quote, but close enough for PIM, that 75% of investments in managing product data fail to meet business expectations in some way or another. And Stephen kind of flirted with it a little bit here, but guys, I got to tell you, just putting a PIM in, just adding a PIM, adding one more acronym to your tech stack doesn't make all of your problems go away, right? There's a lot more to it. So we're curious to know, for those of you that do have a PIM, how much value are you getting from the system relative to what you thought that you were going to get, right? Because you know, it goes back to that hype cycle where we get some shiny new technology and we just think sometimes that we're going to plug it in and all of our problems are going to go away. And sometimes that happens. But oftentimes there's a few waves of that where you realize when you start to migrate your data into the PIM, you start to uncover data quality issues that you didn't even know that you had. You start when you start to you know, set up the roles and permissions of your data stewards and your governance boards. And Inriver has a very powerful mechanism for being able to set all those permissions, but it starts to force you to answer some questions about governance and rules and has organizational impacts. So yeah, just kind of curious for those of you that have it, what kind of value you're getting from that. So we'll take another moment and let you finish that up. And then we will move forward. All right. Next up, we talked about it. We talked about Ntara's role and the work that we've done in the blueprinting process up front. But maybe Stephen, just talk to us a little bit about systems integrators in general. In this entire digital transformation journey, you've got other SIs in the business doing other pieces of work. But as you look at the balance between what an external service provider can provide, and then how you're working with some of those internal teams. Maybe just talk about that a little bit so that the audience has a perspective of kind of the secret sauce that you've been able to figure out.
I think we continue to modify our metal in that secret sauce as well, right? We try to always make that better, and part of that is driving relationships. I mean, that's definitely an important thing, no doubt about it. I always try to use analogies to drive home a point. And I was trying to think of a really good one. I can think of some funny ones and some true ones, but the reality is big decisions in life are rarely made without the advice or counsel of another. Think about even your personal life, whether it's some big decision, something for your kids or spouse or significant other or anything like that. Rarely do we think about making big decisions or doing things by ourselves. And in the same way, analogous to that, Hyster-Yale Group did not want to just make a decision of a PIM or how to go to market or how to make some strategy decisions without that advice and counsel. I mean, you don't really see companies without an advisory board or a board of directors or some other group that helps to influence. And while Ntara did not know all of the business processes of Hyster-Yale Group, what they did have is visibility to so many other things that we never really truly understood. Not only that, with fresh eyes and perspective, it gave us an opportunity to work together and really formulate a strategy that does work for our business. And it's not just one strategy. That strategy continues to evolve through iterative processes. So, your role is certainly selection, advice, but also standing up unique platforms and environments. And we continue to work together to really make this a better working process for our customers and even internals.
Well, not to turn this into a commercial for SIs, guys, but I will tell you, having been in a role like this for quite some time, it is really interesting to see the perspective that we have with dozens and dozens of these implementations. Like we've seen it done so many times. And this, the right and wrong is a continuum. And that those experiences and perspectives, I think, do kind of help us shape. And one last point, and I'm sure, Stephen, you've personally seen this is there are SIs out there that will just take your instructions, right? You'll write up your requirements and then they'll go do something. We're going to ask you questions. We're going to say, are you sure? We're going to challenge you to make sure that what you're telling us that you want is really, really what you want. And I think Hyster-Yale has been a really, really good partner in that perspective, that they've welcomed that challenge. They've appreciated it, as opposed to us just listening to them say whatever we want to do. So we'll often ask why. Like, why do you want to add that attribute? Why do you want to make that change to that workflow? Have you thought about this? And so it goes back to the relationship that you mentioned earlier, and just having a really, really strong line of communication. All right, great. Thanks.
Completely agreed.
Yeah, I think that's really important, I guess, just to kind of echo you there, Jeff. I think, Stephen, you had mentioned earlier that the inriver platform, one of the reasons you chose it is because it's so flexible, because you can manipulate it and kind of form it into whatever fits your business needs. But to Jeff, your point, if there isn't a partner there to kind of help guide, teach them best practices, help from even lessons learned from prior projects, that, like we like to say here at inriver, with great flexibility comes great responsibility. You need to be careful in the way that you're architecting and building the system, because you could have every single type of process built, every feature function that you want in the platform. But if it becomes so overthought and so complicated, thinking just about the data that your users don't or can't use the system, then really you haven't built yourself anything in much of value. So having a partner, having somebody on your team that can help judge what are the right decisions to make, what are the right paths to take when it comes to implementing a PIM is so important in making sure that you're successful together. Perfect. And Stephen, I know you had talked kind of about the initial scope of your PIM project and trying to figure out how do we improve that customer experience? How do we improve the way that we're informing our customers about our products, about the spare or replacement parts, about all of the different products and items that we sell today? And I know that was really the initial goal of the project, but how have things changed over the years, right? You kind of went through this implementation 6 years ago. And I know that was the initial target that you wanted to reach, but how have things changed? Have there been new initiatives, new projects, new teams that have been involved in the prior years?
Yeah, no, yeah, great point. So we initially going into this, one of those, like I said before, guiding stars was, well, let's do e-commerce, right? And no one ever said e-commerce is easy, right? We would be fools to think otherwise. But as we went into this, we quickly realized, as you heard, getting and establishing good PIM framework was absolutely fundamental. We had to do that. And as we started to bring in all of this data and started to look through and map out and model, our PIM to support the needs of e-commerce and a couple other channels, there were more things that were revealed and realized from a business process perspective. But then we also wanted to start to expand. We initially launched our pilot with America's or North American audience for e-commerce. And we've started to expand that now into other theaters for us. So working on our European theater, as well as considering, what does it look like for Brazil and Asia Pacific and several other markets where we have and do business globally. And so the scope now is involving all of these other theaters, which bring about some elements of change or difficulty. We've had to redo the model because we realized, and this is the interesting thing, right? We think globally, well, yeah, we deal with the same part. This is a washer, and we sell it the same ways. Until all of a sudden you get a couple people talking, and usually that medium to bring about people has actually been PIM. It's been a source that's revealed the differences in how we actually do business. And so when we start to map that out and see, oh, we do actually go to market differently, PIM has helped to reveal a lot of that and give kind of eyes internally. So internally now we have teams who are looking at this saying, wow, I see the power that this tool has. And it also gives us the opportunity then to bring about one output or one, we always talk about one single source of truth. We've got multiple inputs that feed that single source so that no matter where you are, it still looks and feels the same. Right. So there's been a lot of scope change in a good way. And I see that continuing to grow, which I think you'll hear about a little bit more later.
Hey, and not to go down a can of worms here, although we are running ahead of schedule, so we got time if anybody wants to see it. But let's not go down the single source of truth route. We could take up a whole nother call on that one. But if anybody does want to argue or debate about single source of truth between Kevin, myself, and Stephen, we'd be happy to entertain that conversation with you afterwards. We had a little fun with that, putting together the presentation.
Well, perfect. I can't really imagine, Stephen, what it was like before bringing a PIM in-house, trying to manage all of the different spare parts and compatible replacement parts for all of the different lifts that you sell for almost the entire history of the company, right? There's a certain length of time, whether it's 20 years, that you all need to kind of manage and know what are all the replacement pieces, parts, components to each of the different products and items that you sell, and doing all of that in Excel files and trying to get them out to the right customers, to the right dealers, to the right partners, not just in North America, but across the globe. I can't imagine the struggle that your teams were going through. And it's great to hear that the processes have improved and the customer experience has improved when it comes to some of those different pieces of information. And I guess as you look to the future, you already talked about how that scope has expanded to not just North America, but now Europe, Brazil, and a number of places globally. Are there other initiatives, projects or destinations that you're hoping in the future for Hyster-Yale to be able to start to get some of that enriched and accurate product information out to?
Yeah, this is the fun part, right? We like to dream together, and we kind of like to get our hands dirty. It's kind of like planning and seeing the harvest and everything else start to manifest. We've got all this data that's like seeds of data that we've sown into the ground, and we're starting to see some benefit and everything else come out of this, which is wonderful and excellent. But we're continuing to really expand upon that, and there's so many ways we can do that. So, Kevin, you mentioned something that triggered a thought there. We do have commitments to our customers to be able to support and service their trucks for 15, 10 years, sometimes longer. But not only that, I mean, we've been servicing these markets for 50 plus years. We've still got, even, I think it's in York, Pennsylvania, there's a truck, a Yale truck that's in operation that was manufactured in 1964. Right? Can you imagine what the parts book looked like? A little different than it does in today's world. And there are many old trucks. I mean, we've had a reputation for quality and robust products. Well, being able to stand up and support that throughout the entirety of the life cycle of a truck is difficult. But it's not just the truck too. It's kind of enabling the customer for success in that. And so what I mean to say is that we're going through some major transformational projects with some of our core systems, like PLM is a big one. And we've got several piecemeal solutions together that are all in transition to a newer platform, which will be excellent. And with that brings a lot of data challenges in of itself. But I can imagine really quickly, and this is part of the plan, to integrate so much more of that data and to really think about how we develop and also syndicate that out to our customers. There's some things that will kind of encourage us to be able to do. One thing we're looking at is, what does predictive maintenance look like? How do we really then take our information and model, maybe it's the data and the telematics that says, here's how many hours your truck has. And oh, by the way, it's not running right because of X, Y, and Z. And we have the ability to fit and tell the customer, well, here's your truck, here's your serial number, here's the parts that we know you need based upon the number of hours that it has. And by the way, you're going to need it in 3 months. And oh, do you want us to give you, this service or that? Right? I mean, PIM again is an undergirding foundation to be able to develop and provide that experience. So we're really excited to see these data inputs. And it's kind of like dreaming, well, what can we do? And the reality is, well, there's not much we can't do. It takes some time, right? It's not like it's going to be delivered tomorrow. We've got to think through this together, inriver, us, Ntara, and everybody. But it's really exciting to consider some of the things we can do with this wealth of data and knowledge.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear that even though the scope has changed, the teams involved have changed, the process has changed, that guiding star, I believe, like you called it at the beginning, the customer experience is still what's driving the future initiatives, projects, and enhancements that you want to bring kind of through PIM and through the systems that you have in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in a similar way to thinking through the importance of having an SI, at your hip and closely aligned, it's also important not to lose sight of your customer and the customer needs. We can never forget that. We would be so ill-advised to just think about, well, here's our business process and we do it this way, and I think it works, right? Let's just continue and maintain the same. Well, what about the customer? What about the dealer? What about, and we do have a complex model where it's B2B to C to XYZ and everything else in between, right? It makes it a challenge. And so if we lose sight of that and just consider ourselves, I don't think it's going to work very well. So that guiding star, the customer experience, is important no matter who that customer is. It could be an internal to our organization. It could be a dealer, a wholesaler, a distributor, the end customer, and there may be several layers in between.
And
So
Stephen,
maintaining that voice of customer is important.
and I can imagine those requirements and those perspectives change all the time, right? I mean, there's market forces, there are competitive forces, there's all kinds of pressures, right? That really, I guess, are dependent on having this core that you can start to kind of work around the edges, kind of at an abstraction layer, right? And to be flexible with the business.
That's right. Yeah, compliance and regulatory and everything else. And a dealer in Illinois says, "Well, I can't take hydraulic fluid because they won't let me in my truck, but I can over in Indiana." Right? And so you start to think about all these nuanced ways of how a dealer supports their customer. Him as an enabler to be able to successfully provide that kind of information, be it specifications or restrictions or rules or governance around that. So it's very powerful.
Well, we are open to take some questions, everyone. If anybody's got any questions for us, feel free to put those in the QA box here and we'll take those. We've got a little bit of time. So here's one. How does Hyster-Yale Group manage data governance and change management? Interesting.
Wow. Yeah. That's it's kind of like sticking me with a needle in the side,
It
right?
is,
There's a
isn't it?
that's a
No
that's a
pressure.
difficult one, right? And that never really stops. You don't just develop a process and call it good, right? That is continuous. We are going through some large data governance, basically workshops right now. And some of that is master data governance. Who owns the data? Where does it originate? And it kind of depends on who you ask and what your role is and what systems you work with. And so we do establish governance from a workflow perspective within the PIM, which is excellent and great. But then at a higher level too, we've got all these systems that have partial ownership of part of the life cycle of a part. And so we are working through what does that mean? The design phase and specifications that link together the fitment, that's largely in the PLM and our engineers who own that. But then when you think about how something's translated or related from a cross-sell or relational perspective, or maybe it's categorized in a way that's different for the end consumer, now that's managed through PIM. And of course, there's other things. And so we're establishing that framework to manage all of that data and set standards, but it is constantly evolving.
Do you have an example of we talked a little bit about this in preparation around, I was joking about single source of truth, and you just mentioned what kind of depends, right? Because the engineering team looks at one thing, the marketing team looks at another thing, the service management team or support teams might be look at something else. Is there an example where you can share where PIMS kind of brought people together, or have you ever have you had a
Mm.
case where one group, was saw all this together and it's like, holy cow, like I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, it was interesting. I am part of this. So we have, and I mentioned this PLM transformation that's going on right now. And a lot of what I'm doing is working through how do we classify and attribute some of these things that are engineer driven. And so I'm involved as a stakeholder in some of that because it naturally plays well into PIM and the information and data that we receive. But some of the engineers in that group are looking at all these data points and thinking, well, this is just for us. It only matters for our engineering teams to understand and know that. And I said, well, and I challenged him for a moment because I thought there's a little bit more to this. And oftentimes engineers don't actually see some of the service life cycle or the parts life cycle and the maintenance of equipment. And I challenged him and kind of thought, well, have you ever had to service like a home appliance, a washer or a dryer or lawn equipment, agriculture, anything like that, and you're looking for parts? How do you find it? What do you do and what's a good experience? And we started to kind of work through that discussion. And I said, well, imagine for a moment that you're a Hyster-Yale Group dealer or a customer and you're looking for these things. And we have some good parts diagrams and models. Don't get me wrong, we've been doing this well for many years, but have you seen a picture of it or seen some other specifications and other attributes about this that's different than just, what's the durometer of the nitrile rubber used in a seal, right? What else are you expecting to see? And we talked about this and I showed him, I said, take a look at what I'm working on. Take a look at what this system has. And all of a sudden his eyes totally lit up. And he realized it was really a light bulb moment where he realized, wow, I didn't know this data existed anywhere. I can see now how valuable that is for the dealer or for the customer. I had no idea. And so now I'm getting pinged all the time from these engineering groups saying, hey, can I get access? Can I get some of that data? Can you send it to me? Right. And so it's great to have this as a two-way street where we both share and funnel information that's really supporting both of our groups.
You know, you talk about two-way information exchange. Everybody on this call has probably seen one of these charts that talks about PIM and where it fits. And you've got your inbound data, right, from different sources, and they feed into a PIM, and then you have all the cool stuff that happens in PIM, and then you've got your outbound sources. And we always talk about that as if it's a relatively linear flow. But we're seeing more and more cases, right, where customers have requirements for these bidirectional integrations. So not only is their ERP feeding supply chain data to the PIM, but PIM is feeding data back to the supply chain. So we're starting to see where PIM is much, much, much more of a, I won't say single source of truth, but it's a place, a trusted place that's receiving data, but the customers are using the power of enrichment and workflows and governance to then be able to push even better data back out to some of those source systems. And so the role of the systems, the role of PIM is certainly evolving over time.
Yeah, and I think even to that, the way that inriver has gone and the way we're continuing to go is looking at that same use case and that same value of feeding kind of a bi-directional loop of continuously improving that data. But Stephen, to your point, we're focused on our customers as well. We want to know what's the data that's actually reaching your dealers, your customers, where you're sending the information out, and pairing digital shelf analytics to look to make sure, is it the right data? Is it exactly what we sent out? Not only from a product description and keywords, but from an image standpoint as well. So looking to see, is the right, accurate, and up-to-date information on all of these end marketplaces and destinations across the globe, and then taking that same information and also looking to see, well, what are ways we can improve it? What are different keywords that we can use to help with things like our SEO, our category ranking, our product ranking? So that bi-directional loop that we have with internal systems is exactly what we have with external systems as well, like marketplaces, dealers, and different websites, to be able to feed and improve that data that's impacting our customers as well.
Yeah, that loop is going to become even more and more important. We were talking a week or so in a meeting about this, and I was thinking back about Nils Eric Peterson, if anybody knows him, kind of a mentor of mine over the years in the PIM space, and he always kind of taught about data quality, completeness, and accuracy. And we were looking at the different dynamics to say I've got good data, and I realized that we have always, or I've certainly have always looked at data quality of what that means in the PIM. Right. So, and that's how we've often said, oh, we're so proud of this single source of truth, or we're so proud of this data in our PIM. But where the market is pushing us and our customers are pushing us to say, well, yeah, but it's still not right on the B2B marketplace. And it's still not right in that catalog or this print publication. And so I think the expectations of the market, nobody cares how good the product data is in your PIM anymore. The real measuring stick is going to be how good is the data at the endpoint that it's being consumed by the people that need the data.
Yeah,
Steve, any
exactly,
closing thoughts?
Jeff. The data validation and data quality internally is, of course, very important, and you need to validate that data throughout the kind of data process. But to your point, likely the most important place to validate that data is correct. And also, unfortunately, the most difficult place to validate that data is correct is, what are your customers seeing? What's on the PDP page? What's actually showing up outside of our four walls on different websites and marketplaces? And that's the insight that inriver is going to provide.
Steven, any closing thoughts on that one? We got one more question here. If not,
Yeah, no, I mean, data quality is certainly a challenge. I found that we're, it's certainly a struggle of ours, right? We talk about PIM as being a solution to many of these things, which it absolutely is, but it doesn't go without work, right? And there's some investigation and messiness and getting dirty with the data, if you will, right? So there's a method to being able to clean that up. But I think for us, one of the most important things has always been putting ourselves in the shoes of the customer, and what do they see and how do they engage with that, and is it meaningful? And I always ask myself, is it meaningful? Does it do something? And oftentimes our data quality has not been good, but PIM is the enabler that allows us to change that, see that, and have visibility to that. Whereas before it was just, very manual. It was spreadsheet, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. Spreadsheets. Another question here, and I think this is certainly something that for those clients or prospects that are trying to evaluate if they need a PIM and which PIM and kind of on the early side of their journey, they definitely have this question. I see it in RFIs and RFPs every week, but I also imagine that this is a conversation that's also relevant. Even Stephen, for someone like yourself that's been doing this for years, maybe talk to us a little bit about um, the importance or maybe your approach on selling PIM. I know I run into cases where engineering people will say, "Oh, well, we've already got all of our product data lives in our ERP." How have you maybe talk to us a little bit about how you've approached that?
Yeah. Yeah, and to tag into that too, engineering people say, well, we've got the ERP for this and we've got the PLM for that. What more do you need? What more is there? And again, that's really short-sighted because they don't realize the extent and breadth of how our business either goes to market or the products that we offer. Not only that, if it were only those products, I would say, well, how do you categorize this or translate this or relate things together in ways that go beyond the fitment of something? What if I wanted to suggest that when you're doing this maintenance and routine or something else, you also need this other part that's not necessarily related to a fitment or a structure. It's not part of the bill of materials or anything else. And PIM enables you to do that, but no other system does, right? There are so many points that I could give that really drive home value. And some of this is the ability to have flexible means to be able to support this to the end customer. I mean, we our PLM and ERP systems are very static in how they deliver information, but PIM, on the other hand, completely changes that, right? And so it gives us the ability to change how we talk about this information and merchandise these products or decide to promote these products. There's a big difference in what it does. And so for us, at first there was reluctance, but PIM is absolutely foundational to the success of our digital strategies, namely e-commerce, but pretty soon it's going to go into some other avenues of capturing data. Just, I guess, one other really quick point on this, it's going to really quickly turn into a way that we need to market some of our products. Thinking about digital twin and everything else that's happening, the ability for us to have all of this data housed within our PIM for any global consumption and to be able to either print or syndicate that is absolutely paramount. Without a PIM, it would be pretty much impossible.
Don't see any other questions. So last call for questions of the team. And we did that without any diagrams or flow charts or fancy pictures too. So good job, guys. Kevin, you want to close us out with an announcement here about Pinpoint?
Yeah, perfect. So first off, thank you everybody for joining us today. We hope you found the conversation insightful, and thank you, Stephen, very much for helping kind of bring light to the value of PIM and the value of Ntara and SI partners inside Hyster-Yale. I think one thing we really wanted to mention was around Pinpoint. And what Pinpoint is inriver's user conference, where we host multiple sessions exactly like this, where we're talking with customers, we're talking with partners about what's happening in the industry, what's happening with PIM, what are some use cases and best practices that we've seen work really well with different customers, exactly like Hyster-Yale. So if today's conversation was interesting, insightful, or helpful at all, please join us at one of our Pinpoints, either in Chicago, in America, or in Malmo, Sweden, if you're in Europe. Again, thank you, everybody. We really enjoyed the conversation today, and thank you again, Stephen, for all of the insight.
Yep.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.